Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Girl Boss Method podcast. So, tonight is one all about us ladies, us girls. It's the impact of the menstrual cycle on training. So, how hormonal fluctuations can affect performance and recovery as well. So, firstly, I'm going to ask how much information do you feel like you've had with regards to the menstrual cycle, full stop, other than it being like a lived in experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's not as much around as there probably should be, but because I'm kind of interested in it, I've and gone through certain life stuff. I've researched a bit more into it.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Not really available.
it's not, right? And so that's the thing. Um, and so a lot of this information I've taken from a couple of researchers. So Dr. Nikki Key is a an amazing researcher, physiologist, and she specializes in all sorts of female athlete scenarios. So, when it comes to things like relative energy deficiency, again, this might blow your mind, but it's just stuff to do with young girls overtraining and basically losing their periods and suffering with things like weight issues and stuff like that. So we're thinking more in the realm of like dancers, gymnasts, that sort of thing. And then yeah, anyone else that's like in that sort of elite world that is potentially doing a lot of training. And that's generally where, when we're thinking about research, even when I studied like physiology and stuff, and you learn a bit about female stuff, you never learn on my degree. I never learned about the menstrual cycle. This has only come about afterwards. And again, like you say, research. And last year I went to, so you know that last weekend I went to a nutrition conference. Last year I also went to the same nutrition conference because it's the same place where I did my nutrition training. And it's brilliant because it's great sort of engaging in continued professional development. I'm a big fan of that. I don't feel like you just tick a box, you know it, and then you know it, or you definitely don't, because things are always changing, research is always changing, etc. um, Even going back as far as, I don't know if this might be, again, you might understand this, but when it comes to like even muscle fibers, when I studied to become a gym instructor 20 years ago, there was only type 1 and type 2. Now we have type 1 and type 2A and type 2B. And I learnt that 15 years later. And I was like, what? Things have changed. So you can only imagine how much is constantly changing, even with cycles and stuff, right? But unfortunately, there's just not enough research out there. So, from what I understand, I think there's all of 20 studies that have ever been done on menstrual cycle training, like actual proper scientific studies. And a lot of the stuff before that we were taught, as coaches, or, doing the sports science modules and stuff like that when I did my degree, it was always stuff about this female triad. So females that train hard, that lose their periods, that are underweight, that overtrain, and that was it. We won't talk about anything else. And I think only in the last few years, and you'll know this, that again, is it because of Instagram? Is it because of there's more women in the field of science that are actually stepping out and going, no, we need to investigate this stuff and get more serious about it. But yeah, things are getting better, right? So there is starting to be a bit more information out there. At the same time, you do get a lot of misinformation as well. And I'm sure that if you were watching or looking at Instagram, maybe like last year or even the year before, people were selling programs specifically on menstrual cycle to say, this is the way, and this is the way you should train. This is the way that every woman should train on their period. And this is when you do what you do here, and this is what you do there. And XYZ, right? And we're going to kind of take you through a bit of the information that sort of is more like the truth, and then also the guidance as well. So, firstly, we need to understand our menstrual cycle and then our training as well. And so, you need to firstly be engaged in regular training to know that it's even going to have an effect on you, right? Because you can't say, I need to train a certain way with my period. If you're not being regular with your training and you're not being consistent, then how are you going to tie that in with your menstrual cycle? Or is it going to become another sort of like a procrastination in terms of getting into the gym, another roadblock, another excuse in that respect? And I get it. Ladies, you're busy, tired, families to support, life to live. There's so much going on, but we can't consider this stuff heavily until you're actually really in that performance realm. And that's basically where a lot of this stuff that, these studies and stuff have been done. They're usually done with athletes, right? Okay, because that's just the way it is, right? So your hormones firstly, they fluctuate across your menstrual cycle. And these changes can influence your energy, your recovery, and your performance. Your training effectively needs to have a personalized approach. And again, this comes back to the whole thing of, the sort of, oh, you train like this at your period and you do this at this time and, whatever have you. It needs to be a personalized approach. So firstly, we're going to go through the 4 main phases of your menstrual cycle. So when you ladies that are in your childbearing years, you are still menstruating, you haven't gone through the menopause just yet. When you are during this era of your life, you'll obviously have a menstrual cycle present. Now, firstly, that will start with your menstrual phase. So days 1 to 5. Again, this is all guidance. Some people have a period that lasts 2 days, others it might last 7 days. So it all really depends. And then obviously you've got your follicular phase, which does include the menstruation, but that lasts the first 14 days. You will feel a certain way based on, obviously hormonal things that occur. And then you have your ovulation. We know when that happens, the egg is released, and that's more likely when you're going to get pregnant, etc. And then you've got your luteal phase where everything starts to almost down regulate again. So here is a wonderful picture that I just thought I would throw in and do my best to also try and guide you in terms of how this looks. So here we go. If you can follow my cursor down here on the left, this is typically your menstruation day 1. You've just got your period. And let's just say that you kind of last 5 days there, right? This first phase or first transient part of the phase lasts again around here. And typically when we're thinking about the length of your actual cycle, it can last anywhere between 22 to 35 days long. So when they say that it's like a 28-day on average menstrual cycle, apparently it's more like 29. We don't actually have, a specific. And if you use a menstrual cycle tracking app, and you would say that, you think that you're kind of regular, how do you know that you're regular when we've got months that last different lengths anyway? You got 31 days, 30 days, 28 days, 29 if we're in the leap year. So it's always going to be slightly skewed. And I think that sort of stuff is good to kind of look at. I think it's good to track to find out where you are in your cycle for various obvious reasons. But I think it's also important to know that if you have got menstrual cycle issues, why is that happening? And what are the causes, etc. And those are things that ideally would be you to kind of go and see a specialist in terms of that sort of stuff, getting hormonally tested, etc. But yes, coming back to it, so between day 1 and the midpoint, let's just assume 14, you've got your follicular phase, and this can be broken up into 2 sections. You've got your early follicular and then your late follicular, and then you come into your luteal phase, right? And apparently this has got something to do with the moon as well. But you've got your early and then your late luteal, and your late luteal is generally where you have that sort of pre-menstrual. It's those days before your actual red days, your bleeding days come in. Yeah. So one thing I haven't touched on within this with the menstrual cycle is we're not talking about the effects of, and we can do this in another training because I think this would be quite cool as well. The effects of hormonal strategies. So again, whether that's like your progesterone only or your combined hormonal, or like what are the other things that you have? The implant in your arm, the coil, all those things, whether you've got hormonal, non-hormonal, those will be different. And we can go through the reasons why in like another training, again, based on the stuff that I've learned. I'm not an expert in this field. I'm, again, just somebody that's learning this stuff. I've learned this stuff, and I'm obviously passing on that sort of education to you girls. So whatever I say is not set in stone. Okay. But yes, again, when we're thinking about how this works, you've got all these wonderful peaks and troughs here. You get a little low bit where your ovulation occurs, and then we come back up, and then we transition on. And then actually, if you have a look down the bottom here, this is where the actual hormones are kicking in. So these are the jobs. This is the job of your hormone. So you've got your progesterone, you've got your luteinizing hormone, your estradiol, which you don't really need to know anything about, and then you've got your follicular stimulating hormone. These are your hormones that are responsible for your menstrual cycle. They are important, but they are also totally normal. And it's really funny because I met Dr. Nikki again at the weekend because she was talking about the relative energy deficiency in female athletes at the weekend. So again, like I said, all the stuff to do with low weight, low energy, that sort of thing. She was saying that when it comes to the menstrual cycle, if somebody ever says to you that you're hormonal, that you should take it as a compliment, because you have this wonderful, what she called choreography occurring within each month. And she's a dancer anyway, so that's why. Background in ballet. Okay, perfect. So again, this is just another image that I've taken as well from lecture slides, but just to say that, cycles are highly variable. And again, when you're thinking about your month, it's not just like, this is it, bang on, I'm going to be right there in the middle of the month, and it's a 28-day cycle. It will literally be skewed as you go along. It will just be, again, it's going to be dependent on you as an individual. So maybe you're thinking about your own periods right now, and you're thinking, gosh, where do I sit in that sort of 22 to 35 day? Do I differ? Do I change throughout that? Is it always precise? So again, these are sort of interesting questions to ask yourself. And I think also it can be quite demoralizing when you feel like your periods are all over the place, and then you actually learn, well, actually, I'm pretty normal. Because I always thought, personally, I thought, oh my God, yeah, my periods are all over the place. And now I've seen this stuff and I'm like, wait, no, I'm totally normal. So again, I think just putting that into perspective. So I thought it'd be interesting next to kind of talk about the whole topic, the whole reason we're here. So menstrual cycle phased based training, right? So contrary to popular belief, cycle training is not only, doing yoga, walking, fearing intensity, or skipping workouts altogether during your luteal and your menstrual phase. In the studies that we do actually have, it's more to do with the total sessions in the first 2 weeks of the month than the second 2 weeks of the month. So we're going to kind of go back to this, and I'll explain what I mean here. So typically around your early follicular and your late luteal, that's generally where you might have an effect. Okay, so you think about, you feel shit the week before your period, you feel crap on your period. That's what that means. So cycle training, people try and tell you that you should be doing lesser intensity or different things. If you really are heavy into your training, and you think about, typically, especially when we're thinking about gym, a lot of sort of people that kind of just train in gyms, resistance train, bodybuilders, that sort of thing, they might do these things where they call them like deload weeks, where they don't stop training altogether. They just kind of lay off the intensity. Potentially, you could have something where there were less sessions, right? So you imagine you don't beat yourself up. You're pre your period or you're on your period, you feel like shit, and you're like, do you know what? I can't get that extra session in. It's okay. I think where it's more important is around this late follicular and early luteal for sure. Okay. So what we do know about the, again, as I've kind of mentioned back on the graph there, but when we are thinking about menstrual cycle phase training, the follicular based training may be better than the luteal training phase, but it doesn't mean that, it does, but not necessarily normal training. So if you're going to periodize your period, it makes sense to kind of focus on those first 2 weeks of the month rather than the last. But again, this is going to differ from person to person. And at this time, we can't confidently say that the follicular phase training is better than regular training. But what it does mean is that it appears to make no actual difference in terms of your strength or your hypertrophy. Again, with very slight differences in muscle growth, if at all. We lack any clear consensus on how this translates to aerobic training, or again, specifics on periodizing techniques. So you can imagine there's a massive, big gap. Everything is like hypothesized at the moment, which is really annoying, because you're like, I've got this thing going on, I've got this period. Again, it's just coming back to the whole thing of like working out how you feel personally at different times. And again, this can be something that maybe we can include in a little bit more detail in the check-ins. Again, when you know that you're typically, this is how you feel, maybe there might be some further questions that I need to ask you. Or again, it might be that we kind of go, let's accept that this is where we are during our periods. And then we know if there's a sort of time where we're like, oh, I feel really crap, it's late luteal, potentially, if that's your, generally there's a pattern with your energy levels around then, that maybe if you've skipped a session, it's not the end of the world, and to also not be so hard on yourself and like beat yourself up about it, because we know that changes are happening. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to come back to all the different phases in general. So training during your period. So the hormonal profile during this period is you get low estrogen and progesterone, and your symptoms will include things like your fatigues, your cramps, your mood changes. Again, this is not specific to everybody, but again, you might want to not just ignore exercise at all, but just work on a lower or moderate intensity as needed. And then when we're kind of coming out into that more follicular phase. Sorry, it's just need to turn that off. Sorry. I told you you're going to get interrupted. Hang on. So then when we're coming back to the follicular phase, training here, you're getting that rise in estrogen. Again, here you might have some enhanced muscle training, recovery. Again, this might be ideal for sort of higher intensity workouts. And during this phase, your strength gains might be a bit better. So again, with these hormones rising, they're going to drop again as we come into the next, or they peak and then they drop after we go through ovulation. So again, around ovulation, you might have increased energy and motivation. However, I don't know if any of you have ever figured this or had this situation where you can become almost a little bit more clumsy. Yeah, maybe a bit more clumsiness can occur around this period. Mm-hmm. So again, it's a surge in estrogen and luteinizing hormone. Again, just making sure maybe at this point you're focusing a little bit more on, yes, your warm-ups, your proper form, and yeah, maybe again, not trying to go crazy with like ramping up the intensity and doing loads of HIIT and everything. Again, it just differs. If what I don't want this to do is to make you think, oh my God, I need to suddenly start training differently. Like, don't think that. This is again just an overview for you to kind of take with a pinch of salt and just kind of go, do I feel this? Is this something that I've experienced? And know also that again, well, this whole the slideshow is going to be available for you guys to come back and watch anytime anyway, if you ever want to come back and revisit. And then when we're coming into that luteal phase, so this is like we've had the follicular, so the early part, you've had your menstruation and the rise in all the hormones. Then you've had your ovulation, and now you're going to have a decline. So the progesterone is going to keep rising at this point, and then your estrogen is going to drop. And so here you might find that you've got increased fatigue, your body temperature as well, you're a bit hotter, maybe experiencing some bloating. Maybe that's what the luteal thing means. Maybe a bit like, I don't know if you've ever heard that thing that when the moon's out, you suddenly feel bloated. Lunar, luteal, moon, water, God knows, right? We're just such mystic creatures. So again, during this, you might again want to moderate and intensity exercise and prioritize your recovery and nutrition. We are going to talk about nutrition separately when it comes to the menstrual cycle. And again, you may have heard me say this, that there might be certain times of the month where you might need to have a bit more food, and we can make allowances for that. Okay. So there will be certain times of the month where, you know, there's an increase in actual like metabolic rate. So there's an increase in metabolism. And from what I was sort of reading up before, it was something bizarre. Like, let me find it here. It could just basically be a lot more. Let's put it that way. We are looking at, I had it here. We are looking at a lot higher. Right, I've lost it. Okay. Oh, yes, here we go. You can look at your resting metabolic rate during your luteal phase can actually increase by 2.5 to 11.5%. So that basically means you might be able to have, and you may have heard me say this, when I'm like, oh, we can tweak and increase your calories slightly, because again, this might be a range for you. It might be something anywhere between like 89 to 279 calories a day. But again, this is so it's I think we've got someone's thingy on. But yeah, cool.
Sorry.
That's all right. Nick, was that you?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. You'll have to come back and watch the rest of this for sure. Okay, so when we're thinking about the actual impact on performance, and we're looking at the data, and I did say something about 20 studies, right? Most studies, so about 14 out of the 20, because there's hardly any research out on female stuff. Hopefully there will be in the next few years, especially, you know, kind of like, again, like I mentioned before, Dr. Nikki Key, and I didn't mention the other girl. Again, you may have seen some of her references on there. Alyssa Olinik. She's an American, and Nikki's actually based here in the UK, and she's quite an older lady now. She's gone through menopause and stuff, but she's got so much research. But Alyssa is a lot younger, and she's like a PhD, so she's got lots of stuff and studies and stuff that she's helping bring forth for sure. So yeah, again, coming back to this, most studies find no effect on the actual menstrual cycle phase on aerobic performance. So if we're thinking about any of you that are like runners, or you like doing your cardio, again, when I talked about HIIT before, that was more from a perspective of any sort of, again, like I mentioned here, anaerobic fitness. So anything where you're like jumping or landing and that sort of stuff, there might be, again, when you ovulate, that's when you kind of become a little bit more dyspraxic, if you like. But yeah, in terms of the aerobic performance, so the ability of your energy systems to work with the presence of oxygen, that there will be no effect. And then when we're thinking about anaerobic fitness, again, this is when we're thinking about training without the presence of oxygen. So we're taking you back to school. This is really old physiology stuff. But again, this is coming back to, you're sprinting. So your shorter stuff might be better mid-luteal. So this is mid-luteal. Again, you've had ovulation, you've got earlier luteal, and you've got late luteal. So this is that period just before you get your pre-menstrual phase. It's there. Okay, that's mid-luteal. And that, again, might be an area where that's maximized. And then when we're thinking about the jumping, and we, again, they've sort of noted follicular training. The follicular period, that jumping might be better, because again, during the luteal phase, there may be a higher risk of injury, right? When we talked about sort of jumping and landing and twisting, you become a little bit more clumsy. Following me?
Yep.
Perfect. Good. I'm taking Raki's head nods because everybody else's head is not finished. It's hidden, which is fine. Okay. And then obviously when we're thinking about power during the ovulation, guys, take it with a pinch of salt, because if this is not blowing your mind, it's definitely blowing mine. I'm explaining it, and every single time I have to really kind of go back and go, right, where am I on that phase? So whilst I'm talking about this, I'm actually looking at the menstrual cycle diagram at the same time. So that's where I'm kind of picturing these things based on, again, the different hormonal releases. And then when it comes to strengths and the studies that have assessed strength, about half of them have reported an impact on strength. So a strength itself is different than muscle growth or muscle building. Strength is more like maximal strength. So don't confuse it with the term strength training, just thinking about sort of the act on the body. That strength itself is more impacted than the aerobic exercise.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go for it.
Are you saying that, sorry, not are you saying aerobic, just a really clarification, aerobic fitness is more your HIIT training and anaerobic is more your running, your like straight cardio. Is that right?
No. So your aerobic fitness, well, ideally we're looking at everything, right? That I want to say anaerobic, gosh, you're really testing me. I think it's anything that uses bursts of energy under 3 minutes. So yes, sprints. You could tie in HIIT with that, because HIIT might have, again, you can actually do.
So aerobic is more your constant cardio, and then your anaerobic is more your.
It kind of layers, because it just depends on the different systems that are used, but it's exercising without the presence of oxygen, which is highly unlikely in terms of what we're doing. And when we're talking about sprinting, we're talking about flat out. It's like when you go to do sprinting, it's those first, like, I think it's like 0 to 1 or 0 to however many seconds is a certain system, and then you kind of come up to the 3 to 5 minute might be anaerobic. I might even have to do a Google search on this, but it's taking me back. You're testing me. Yeah. Oh no, it's good testing me. So yeah, the aerobic is probably where we're more concerned, but isn't it a good thing that there's no effect? Yeah. Following me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Brilliant. Has anyone else got any questions? I know I can't see your faces, ladies, but if you want to just unmute and ask away. Hey, Nick.
Hi. I've literally just finished dinner. I don't really have any questions right now. I'm gonna watch back on this.
Yeah.
And then I will ask any questions if I do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. What are you making?
I made some courgette, sea bass, and I had like lime coriander rice.
Brilliant. Good. You're on it. Prepping.
Yeah.
Very good. Right. Perfect. I might get you to mute again. Thank you, darling. All right. So again, I hope I'm not sending anyone down a rabbit hole. Raki, I certainly see your face looking down the rabbit hole right now. So the studies that have been done have been like literally on like performance athletes and that sort of thing, right? And again, the way that they test is things like, yes, they might do some physical performance tests, so things like jump tests, maybe again like a 1 rep max test. What else? They do like some cardio testing as well. So again, they might do a questionnaire about the sort of psychological well-being, because there's obviously a lot to do that has a heavy part on our cycle as well. The emotions as well have a massive impact, and that's basically what I sort of pointed out here. So again, when we're thinking about the exercise performance, that was associated with self-reported motivation, their perception of their performance, their pleasure, their an arousal, but not pain. Again, the pain was higher in early follicular and late luteal phases. So again, when we're talking about early follicular and late luteal phases, late luteal is pre your bleed and early is your bleed, right? And then when we're thinking about emotions, negative emotions are the things that increased pain and increased perceived difficulty in experience during that luteal phase again, and that can have an impact on someone's want to stick to exercise. So again, it's the way that you're feeling that is impacting the way that you're training, and not necessarily the physiology of your body, right? So this is the thing with the phased based training stuff, and people putting so much sort of heaviness on it. A lot of the hormone stuff is, again, it's the emotions, right? And so then if it's the emotions, well, how are our behaviors changed during that period? How are they changed? And how is that having an effect now on how we feel? And we can think about all sorts of different emotions that we feel around the month. And even when we're looking at the seasons, for goodness sake, this time of year, we start to feel it's not that our bodies suddenly shut down in winter. That's not physiology. That's up here, ladies. It's our feelings and our emotions. We don't want to do it and then we create resistance because we're like, crap, why do I want to go out in the dark and leave the house first thing in the morning to train before work and whatever? So just want to kind of bring it back to that individual variability, right? Every woman is different. So your responses to training can vary widely, which again, you might have been looking for the gold crest, and what is it? The gold standard with how okay, right, I'm going to learn this. This is going to tell me exactly what to do. Unfortunately, we don't know enough yet. So your responses to training, again, can vary widely, and some may feel like fluctuations, whereas others may not. So it's really important that you listen to your body and adjust accordingly. So I find it really funny. And when I started seeing all this stuff about 1 or 2 years, it might be about 2 years ago, about phase-based training, I was like, what the hell? They're telling me like not to, that basically my period, menstruation, I should be feeling at my worst. What? And I kind of go back and go, when I was like, during the look, maybe a bit younger, because trust me, things have changed now. But back then, I would just be like, wow, okay, I'm getting PBs right before on my period. There'd be something that would happen in the gym, and I'm like, yes, I aced this. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wait, somebody's telling me that I should be doing like walking and yoga. Like, how is this so prescriptive, right?
I'm the same.
Yeah.
My day one of my period, like that first week, I'm probably feel my strongest. And when people say you should be taking it easy because you're on your period, I'm like, no.
It's interesting, isn't it? And similarly, I feel hungrier on my period, whereas I know that other ladies, they can open up and say themselves, but
before on my period, I'm not.
You're not hungry. Yeah,
well,
there you go. That's
full.
She's nodding her head as well. Nicolette's saying it as well. I know you don't mind me saying that. She's not either, typically, and it's obviously because I've been with her a long time. I know this, that she's just like, can't eat. Whereas everyone's so different. I'm like, hunger. But again, period lengths is, again, as I've aged as well, like my actual menstrual cycle, I feel more textbook regular now, but I also feel they're shorter. Whereas when I was younger, they were just, they were all over the place. So
question for you. Did you when you were doing your training for being on stage, did you change your training at all then throughout, or did you?
No, I just carried on pushing. You just carried on. I mean, it is going back a few years. Nobody talked about it. Again, maybe my coach at the time would be like, oh, maybe you should just just chill out a bit. But back then, no. And when I sort of mentioned earlier, when we were talking about sort of energy deficiency in females, a lot of women, when they are competing, their periods disappear. And again, it's because of that huge energy restriction and then energy output. I was very, very lucky that didn't happen to me. I may have missed one, but again, I don't feel like I got as low in leanness as some federations. But again, I wanted to, do my best in the fed that I tried. And excuse me.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, but I just didn't, again, I never went to that stage where you can literally, carve out someone's the inside of their rib cage. Yeah, like just the right where your belly is. Like, no. Anyway, each to their own. But yeah, again, competing might be something that's actually, again, you might be surprised to hear this, might actually be more beneficial when you're out of your period, when you're done, when you've gone through menopause and you're like, right.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because you're not messing with this stuff here.
With the emotion.
Yeah, well, also just like your menstrual cycle as well. And that's the thing, again, you've got to be really careful with massive energy restrictions, because I feel like there's not enough talked about it. But the impact that it has on things like bone density as well. Like, these are the years that we should be flourishing. And yes, we can get leaner and we can create change, but you don't want to be doing something where, your complete starvation tactics, where you're eating nothing and it's like 800 calories a day. That's bonkers. Your hair becomes affected, your skin, and people report about that. But then what about the bone density? And then this is where we should be laying the foundations for that. Yeah. So there you go. There you have it. Holistic approach. So again, beyond all this sort of menstrual cycle, it always comes back to, and this again, Nikki, I have to thank her for saying it the weekend, reminding us. She said, it's not the hormones that are out of whack, it's the behaviors. So when people say that things are just not, and then everything's all over the place, so the weight loss isn't happening, or and they think that things are stuck, and they think it's blame the hormones. It's not always the actual hormones. The hormones are doing what they're supposed to do. The hormones are responding and doing that choreography based on what you feed it. So this is why it's so important. Your sleep, your nutrition, the impact of stress, the stress impact of training outcomes as well. And you really do want to focus on overall health for sustainable progress. It's not just let's get fast and whatever, right? Okay. So hormonal changes can influence your performance, but are not limitations. So again, we're not kind of going, right, that this means that I don't do anything. It just means that you're aware. And more and more we get practice. We understand our cycle. We can adapt our training as well. We can not be so hard on ourselves. And another thing that I think is quite probably beneficial, and again, we can have this conversation, any of you ladies listening, but when we're thinking about progressive overload, because I know that can be an area that some women might struggle with, especially with knowing when to go heavier. I like to kind of almost think of that in different phases. So it's like acquiring the skill or the technique. It's then from there loading, increasing the weight. It's then feeling good with the weight. And then it's then increasing the reps, right? So we can kind of almost like cycle it back and then go, right, okay, now that we've increased the reps and we're going to go up with the weight again, now we need to kind of focus back on, or you've increased the reps, you need to focus back on your technique. So that's almost another way of doing things. So if you want to kind of phase things, rep increase, weight increase, I feel good with the weights, let me focus on my form. Yeah. So yeah. All right. I hope you ladies loved this episode today. Thank you so much to those of you that have just sort of tuned in and listening or watching or listening back. Any questions, just send me a message, and you ladies that are on right now, you hang around because we can have a few moments together, and we'll see you here next time.